Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelson, professional horse trainer. And finally, back with me, my co host, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique
Have you been
instructor.
have you been cheating on me?
And we've had so many strangers as guests. It's been really fun
Good.
interviewing. I interviewed two literary people. One's a poet,
Wow.
one's a author of a fictional novel, and a couple people in between. So I'm happy to be back with you, my friend.
Yay.
And today's topic, because we just need to geek out, that's what
I
we
know,
do.
right?
Today's topic is called, I wrote it down, the anticipatory reflex in
Right.
horses and riders. And this came up, I think there was a conversation we were having
Mhm.
about that moment because we were talking about working with our horses where we refrain from giving aids. It's what I call unsupported work, like what I've been doing with Rarely Wrong on the lunge line, just letting
Okay.
her figure things
Go.
out, right?
Hmm.
If she trots and canters and blows up, I go, that's on you, girlfriend. I'm just going
Hmm.
to wait for you to walk. And what I'm looking for is for her to spend that anxiety and start to get a little bit of self-control over her emotional
Right.
state. And so when we do unsupported work, especially if we've been the kind of riders who give a million aids and control everything, been doing a passenger lesson, doing liberty work, doing, you know, free form lunging, like all of that. What I see with people is there's a little struggle. There's a little moment in there.
I call it the rub.
The rub, like,
It's the rub.
yeah.
It's that little angst.
And I couldn't tell, like when you read the definition of the anticipatory reflex, I was like, that nails it
It
because I kept
does.
observing it and I felt it myself. Like,
Oh, it's all about the Alexander work of overriding that.
right, the whole idea of inhibiting. But
Yeah.
that moment, I have to kind of laugh because when I ask a rider to do a safe passenger ride where the rider is just focused on their own balance, but we're letting the horse choose the speed and direction as long as it's safe. We're not steering, not giving leg aids, that kind of thing. And every time the horse is about to head to the gate or about to head to the fence or a corner, people
They can't help
they can't
themselves.
help it to pick up the reins like way ahead of time. And I go, what is that? What
What
is
is
that?
that?
Is that a need to control? Is that a habit? Is it a fear response?
All of the above.
Well, and it's actually has a name. It
It
has a
has a
name.
name.
Yeah,
It
it has a
does.
name called the anticipatory reflex.
Hmm.
So can you share that?
I think
Because
so.
you nailed it when you
I had
found
to,
that definition.
I didn't know there was a definition for it, but it says the anticipatory reflexes are postural muscle contractions that happen before a voluntary movement to prepare for the movement's destabilizing effects.
So we
So,
sort of go, we're about to be unstable, and we have an unconscious response or unconscious reflex
yeah,
of
yeah.
sort of
It's
tightening.
Yeah, it goes back to the thought of we talk about it in the Alexander community all the time about, oh, if you tell yourself to sit, you already have a file in there that says, "Oh, I know how to do that. No big deal."
Yeah.
So to go back and if you think of all the categories you have stored of movements to
Well,
survive, because
even if we just talk about riding, like
right.
how people pick up the reins,
Oh my
how people use stirrups, how people
God.
organize their body during a ride becomes so unconscious that
Yeah,
we
I mean,
just,
what is this always getting on the left side thing? Talk about a habit.
yeah. No, I got on from the offside from my
The
horse's
offside
right
that
side
cracks
the
me
other
up.
day, and I was like, Oh yeah, this is really awkward.
This is our, and
This is-
that's it.
yeah, I
And
could do it.
who wants to spend time trying to unravel all of your subconscious thoughts?
Like it wasn't that hard. I just go, why I don't do it, I don't know. But my horse happened to come up to the mounting block, and I'm on a mounting block. But it was like there was a moment where I'm like, this foot, not that foot, goes in the stirrup, right? This hand, not that hand, holds the mane. And I had to just sort of like, it's inefficient because it's not autopilot. And so there's a little bit
That's a
of,
good way to put it. But what I see is the anticipatory reflex as a rider. Just for example, even on the ground with a lunge line, say you're lunging the horse and you're thinking trot.
hmm
Ask the horse to trot, but you're already in front of the horse's shoulder trotting in your own mind.
yes, or
And the
your
horse goes,
energy
"What are
has
you
come.
doing up here? I
Yeah.
can't trot. You're in my way."
Yes.
And we do
Yes.
that when we ride. We do the same thing.
Or with people who have horses that want to halt all the time. It's like the unconscious use of the leg aids
Oh my gosh, yes.
becomes chronic. And the rider really isn't even aware at a certain point, isn't aware anymore of how much they're pushing with the legs, either how hard or how frequently.
I
And
agree.
it just becomes part of how they ride. It becomes part of normal riding. And sometimes I'll have people hike their knees up and literally take their legs away. Sometimes I'll take the stirrups away. And
Or
sometimes I'll
like you said,
just
take the hands away. That to me is huge because people tend to be so manipulative
unconsciously, not even
unconsciously with their
knowing.
hands.
Yeah. And what I see, the first response is always that anticipatory reflex because suddenly we're not in our familiar territory anymore. And the body instantly sort of tightens a little bit. Like I
Yep.
couldn't quite see what I was, couldn't quite interpret what I was seeing.
Mhm.
But I go, there's always a little bit of increased tension or a little bit of kind of awkward or rapid movements. And it's like the brain has to recalibrate,
Yes.
but the first unconscious response is a bit of a tightening. And
Yes.
and that's what you just read really described it.
Right. Yeah. It's to me, it's like say it's 40 below out, the wind's blowing and it's snowing sideways, looking at your child and saying, "It's cold outside, put on a jacket."
What do you mean?
It's the same. You're anticipating that the kid is not going to be prepared to go out in the cold.
Ah,
But if you just let him step out there, he'll figure it out.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it's like anticipating to me that, like you said, that the horse isn't going to turn or isn't going to turn the way you think he should turn.
Right.
Instead of being the passenger and accepting what the horse gives you and going, oh, okay, I can adapt to that.
Yeah, and it really made me pause and think. And I experienced it myself when I first played with passenger riding. But the moment of panic, like the horse is at the walk and the horse is headed straight towards like gonna T-bone into the fence or the corner,
Right?
right? And even though things are slow and there's really no danger, the reaction of the rider is the same as if the horse was just about to bolt. Like I go, that moment of panic, well, what I called sort of a moment of loss of control or panic, it almost creates the same response, whether it's I don't know where my horse is going to go, or the horse actually had a big reaction that would be hard to stay on. And so maybe that, anticipatory reflex is people go, I don't know which way my horse is going to go, or if my horse is going to stop. And so that kind of what is it you said? Something about anticipating instability. Like
Right.
we automatically
The
assume we're,
possibility of instability. That and
yeah,
it hasn't even happened.
it hasn't happened, but all of a sudden we realize we could possibly become unstable.
Yeah, I've got to fix the problem instead of fixing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thought.
And it's the same reaction whether we don't know where our horse is going to turn next at the walk, or our horse suddenly spooks or
Right.
suddenly, bolts. I go because that anticipation of being unstable is
It
the
sets us up
same.
for failure.
Well, it is the same reaction.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
But I think the really cool part of doing like a passenger ride at the walk is that we can learn to recognize those moments and inhibit them, make a different choice.
Right, make
And
a
which
different choice.
happens in like nanoseconds, right? This is not something that we really stop and consider. It's just a matter of going, I could make a different choice.
Yeah, exactly. That's
And
what my work is
between,
all about, is making different, stopping and changing and going a different way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because human instinct and horse instinct will always kind of feed each other in a negative way. And so if we kind of act on that anticipatory reflex and regain control of our horse, because the horse is like, what? I'm not going to run into the fence, right?
Well, let's say at least 95% of them wouldn't.
I think I've had one or two horses because they were so accustomed to being guided that when I didn't guide them, they did actually bump their nose on a fence. Like, but never more than once or twice. And
Right.
suddenly those horses that had been always told what to do, it was like they woke up and went, "Oh, I have to control my own body." And I go, "Yeah, like you don't have to run into the wall if you don't want to." And most other horses, they get all the way to the wall, and we find out just how agile horses are by turning at the last moment, like the whisker moment of hitting the fence, and they put in a turn.
It's like watching cutting horses.
Yeah, even if it's slow motion, like at
Yeah,
the walk, right?
it's always amazing to me, and I don't know if you've ever ridden one, but oh,
Yeah.
it's a great adventure
It's
to
amazing.
do
And the
that.
horse is doing all the work. You're not
Yeah,
directing that.
you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, and I go, look, if you don't think your horse is going to jump the fence or go through it, then they're going to stop or turn,
right.
right? And the other funny thing is that the horse goes to the fence, and instead of turning and continuing to walk, the horse stops.
Hmm.
And what do you think the first thing is people do? Like instinctually, people pick up the reins
They do.
and they want to steer the horse out of the
Say,
corner.
why didn't you go here?
Right. And I go, what if you just gave a leg aid and said, move? And I said, then your horse's options are go through the fence, go over the fence, or turn. I go, most horses are going to turn, right? If you think your horse is going to go over the fence or through the fence, then you might need to steer.
Right.
But I go, if you don't think that's going to happen, you could experiment giving a leg aid and let your horse figure out where to go.
And I mean, the anticipatory reflex was built into us to protect us so we
Mhm.
would survive. But is it relevant in riding?
Well,
Is the
is
truth.
it always useful?
Yeah, all the
Because,
time and have
right,
it on
so
all the time.
it's useful
Yeah.
as a survival instinct, but 99% of becoming really good as a rider or really good with horses is overriding our human instinct.
I totally agree.
And so, does it serve us is the question when we're interacting or having a relationship with a horse. Because I go, horses are prey animals, we're predators. Those two instincts don't naturally coexist easily. So, we're asking our horse to overcome instinct with pretty much everything we ask him to do,
Yeah.
right? Even being ridden is counter instinctual
Right.
for horses. That's why wild horses, you don't just run out, put a halter on them, bring them in and tack them up, right? But with our horse, we're asking them all the time to inhibit instinct and use learned skills in the human environment.
Right.
And so when we ask, when that sort of gets put on us, we go, "Ooh, that's a little harder." Like
It's dicey.
it's harder than people expect it to be.
It like I said, that's the Alexander work. It is so hard to inhibit that and to give people the choice that if you can't make a decision to walk away from it even. I mean, we don't give ourselves permission to do that.
That's true. Just to
Yeah.
stop,
Just
pause, take a minute,
take a minute,
take a breath, redo it.
redo.
I go, you can redo it 10,000
Right. Because
times.
if you don't have the answer right there, that's okay.
Yeah. But I think the outcome and the reason I love working on passenger riding with clients is the depth of understanding, the depth of sort of self-awareness of our own habits, or more awareness of our horse's movement, our horse's energy, the more
Bingo. I
subtle
totally
things.
agree. I totally agree with that one because I think once they let go of the visual and the touch of the reins, their
Or the
timing and
habits.
feel gets much quicker as a rider.
Yeah. As soon as we put ourselves in unfamiliar territory, our senses wake up. We become more sensitive because we're in doing something unfamiliar. And
Yeah.
especially if we're doing something unfamiliar and relinquishing control. Holy moly, is that a big trigger?
Yes.
Yeah, because all of a sudden we have to put a little bit of trust in our horse, and we have to know that we have to trust ourselves to go, I can respond in a second. Like giving a rain aid takes like less than a second,
Hmm.
right? You could take one rein and turn your horse in a second if you had to. So to refrain from doing that unless you absolutely have to, it just puts people in very unfamiliar territory.
Yeah, it kind of brings up the thought for me, the upper level riders, especially if you're the Washington International Horse Show was just here. And the fine-tuned communication with these jumper riders, you don't see them hauling off on the horses' mouths to turn them. You know, it's this very sweet, delicate kind of relationship that's going on.
It's
It's
invisible to
it
anybody
is.
watching.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very clear between us and the horse because horses are so sensitive.
right.
And I think we all, no matter how much talent we were born with or not, we all can refine our sense of touch. We all
Oh,
can
yes.
learn to trust our feel and our own balance and become heighten our sensitivity to be on par with our horse, where our horse is naturally. But we have to work at it a little bit. And the only way we become more sensitive, or actually, I should say, the quickest way to heighten our senses is to break routines, challenge
Mhm.
habits, do something different, do the same thing a different way. Like all of that puts
Yeah,
us
and
in.
yeah, and you
eh,
can practice it off the horse. You know, it's it's so simple. Vacuum with your other hand. Brush
Ooh,
your teeth with your other hand.
ooh,
Open the car door with your other hand. Go up a
ooh.
step with the off leg. It's everywhere in my world.
All of those sound, yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah.
there's a
Something
lot you can do
I would have to talk myself into doing. Yeah,
because your habit will come up everywhere if you tune into it.
it's true.
Yeah,
Well, I'm right-handed, so I go, how many times do I just on autopilot do everything more with my right
right.
hand than my left hand?
Hmm.
And actually, that's kind of what I liked about working horses was I have to be more equal side to side functionally.
Good point.
I have to be more balanced sort of front to back, like all of those balance or physical use issues come up when we're riding and when we're working with our horses. Because if we're one-sided severely, we can actually sort of create one-sidedness in our horse.
Well, I think we see that quite a bit.
Hmm.
Or the like we started with at the beginning, this whole left-sided everything with horses.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
something came up recently, and it was an exercise I used to do for myself years ago when I was really struggling to stabilize my seat, particularly my lumbar, because I had just so much curve through my lumbar. I know you had the same issue with your body.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I found surprisingly helpful and was also surprisingly comfortable and stable was when I was on my horses bareback or in a saddle, I would take my feet out of the stirrups if I had them, and I'd hike my knees up all the way to the horse's withers. So I was basically putting myself in jockey position on the back of a horse, but my seat was still in the saddle or
Right.
bareback. And then I would sort of lean forward a little and grab mane if I felt unstable. I could use my hands a little bit on the mane to just stabilize. And I did that because it really exaggerated um, the feeling for me of what it was going to take to straighten my lumbar and
Oh.
change my core use to stabilize my pelvis and my lumbar. So I did it for that reason and then kind of forgot all about it. And it came back up, interestingly, as a strategy for sensitizing our seat,
Hmm.
right? And
Well, that makes sense because if we're sway backed, which most women, that's the posture they go to, is our sit bones can't possibly be on the saddle.
right. So how
Yeah.
we use our lumbar spine makes all the difference to how we
Right.
can use our pelvis when we're riding. But whether it was male or female riders, I don't think any of us realize how much we use our legs when we're straddling a horse. And to pull the legs up into jockey position, all of a sudden, within 5 minutes of doing that, and if people feel insecure, we can grab mane with our hands, or I will lead horses for people. So I'm
Yeah, I
just,
do that a lot.
leading the horse so they can feel safe. But almost instantly, the brain finds another way to stabilize. And
Yeah.
of course, I see as soon as I, take people's legs away, I see the anticipatory reflex.
Yep.
Everybody gets nervous because we're in very unfamiliar territory. But the benefit of it is how fast people sensitize to the horse's barrel rolling side to side, or all the movement that's coming
Mm.
up through the saddle right into the rider's pelvis and core. But
It's
we don't,
overwhelming when you get there. It's
it
it's kind
is.
of over the amount of information that you can receive from your horse can be very overwhelming.
Yes, up through your seat bones into your
Yeah.
core and your lumbar. Like that information is critical for us to have to help our horse balance, but also for our own stability. And so I don't think any of us realize how much our legs unconsciously fill in the gap. So if we're
Oh yeah, it's
struggling,
everywhere.
yeah, if we struggle, as soon as our seat and our core becomes a little bit unstable, our legs kick in automatically.
Mhm.
And the legs could be pushing into the stirrups, could be heels down, could be gripping inward, could be the thigh bone too far forward or back, there's all kinds of ways that we could use our legs when our seat is unstable. But I
Yeah,
go,
I'm constantly questioning my relationship with my stirrups. Am I bracing? Am I locking? Because I have something to push against
but
instead of
you
my
also have a certain training to that awareness,
right.
which is really the first hurdle for all of us.
I agree.
It's like, never thought about it, right?
Right.
Never thought about it. So when we physically take, like a lot of times, because using the hands is so instinctual for humans, I just give the hands something else to do. I go grab the front of the saddle, grab the mane, grab the neck, grab anything but the reins. right? And that way, use your hands as much as you want, but you're not affecting the horse's mouth. Or take the legs out of the equation is what brings the awareness immediately up to the surface.
Right. And what it comes back to is, and we've talked about this quite a bit over the years, is head, neck, back, pelvis balance.
Yeah,
If
but it's
if
more
that
subtle
integrity is not intact, then the hands and the legs are going to take over. It's that simple.
automatically.
Automatic safety, safety thing.
Well, and the more that's become a habit, the less we are aware that that's how we're organizing. And so when we take the hands, we give the hands something else to do, right? Or take away the legs. And I see that anticipatory reflex right away because the brain doesn't know yet how to be stable. But what people figure out within strides, I mean, so fast that you don't have to play with this more than like 10 to 20 minutes to completely change how you feel your own horse.
And
It
it's
doesn't
kind of
take
fun.
long.
It's kind of fun to change it up, instead of your regular ride in the ring, especially if you have somebody that can help you.
Yeah, or there's those of us that love roller coasters, and I love that feeling of the anticipatory reflex is a little exciting. I like the feeling of not exactly knowing what my horse is going to do next because I find it keeps me really focused and I get in the movement. I can start really synchronizing my energy and my body with the horse
I
because
think you've hit the
I'm,
nail on the head is you see it as an excitement and as fun, where
mhm.
a lot of us may go, I don't see
Oh,
it that way.
I know. I can even feel people out there
I
listening to
know.
this podcast going, no way,
What?
no how,
Uh,
not
uh,
doing it.
Give
They're
up
having an
control.
anticipatory reflex just picturing what we're talking about.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. And we can all do it, you know, in our own way. But the whole point is to realize that there is such a thing called an anticipatory reflex, and we all have it. And I love that sort of defining it is it's a precursor to voluntary movement. I go, that's
Yeah.
how deep it is
It's
in yeah.
and I ask people this question all the time, what comes first, the thought or the action? And it's always the thought. The action comes much later.
Or we could say that reflex
Mhm.
comes
It
first.
does.
And once we start to notice that instinct in ourselves, we create a little bit of a bigger moment for the voluntary use of
Mhm.
our body, right? So instead of
Yeah.
it being on autopilot, either habits or instincts, when we start to notice ourselves having that anticipatory reflex, we can pause and put a little more space in there to go, do I want to choose my habit? Do I want to choose where my body's just going instinctually? Or do I want to make a different choice? Voluntary use of my body. Or what's it called? Not automatic reflex, but
I have to look it up again.
because I know it's part of the somatic nervous system that we have voluntary control over our muscle use and movement. So
It's
it's
activated in a feed forward manner, meaning they happen before any sensory feedback about potential instability.
so we're not sure we're going to be unstable or not.
We just want to prepare.
It's happening even before that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you see that explains everything.
I know,
That
right?
explains
My
everything.
world,
Oh my
my
God.
world.
Yes. Because then we have that moment we go, oh, that was involuntary, but now I have a moment where I could choose what I'm going to do.
Or in my work, it's just noticing that that's happened, and then the change happens. Because if you notice, what happens before what happens, you say, oh, there it is.
And it's
There it
no
is
longer
again.
unconscious. And so
Right.
it's
If it's
how
coming,
you
yeah,
change habits. It's
right,
exactly how you change habits
right.
because you just notice that and go this way instead of that way.
Hmm.
You go left instead of right. You go back instead of forward, whatever. You just change direction
Right.
and go, I'm going to do it this way.
I wonder if you could even think of it like bronc riders or bull riders, because normally what I see is especially the bull riders, they tend to come off if they anticipate, oh, I've been told this bull always goes to the left.
Oh, so do people on horses.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
same thing. And the bull goes to the right and boop, off goes the rider.
Oh, yeah. That was the one time I fell off Hercules was when I first started working with Hercules, who's in the Wexford training barn on the YouTube channel. He would not go right. That's kind of how we figured out he had severe physical issues. He ended up having OCD lesions that were worse on his right stifle compared to his left on the weight bearing part. So he was nicknamed Hercules because he was so freaking strong. And he would not, like, we did all of our initial work to the left, and every once in a while we tried turning right, see if it worked yet. Didn't work, go back to the left. So this one morning I'm riding him, and he used to have a phobia about trailers. And so this guy came in near the riding ring with a landscaping trailer, and it's all rattling and shaking and making noise. And I could not get Hercules to turn around and face it, right? So it ended up coming up behind us. And as it got closer, Hercules bolted and he was bolting and bucking, and I had left the arena gate open. And
Uh-oh.
so, and the barn was to the left, his stall was to the left, and Hercules only turned left, right? So I anticipated and I set up my whole body for a left turn coming out of this arena gate because it was going to be tight and he's bucking and bolting. And what do you know? Hercules turned right and move, off I went. I was like, as soon as and I'm like, well, you can turn right when you want to.
Right. Override, override.
Yes, yes. And
That's
here I
funny.
thought I was so prepared. I was so ready.
And
And he goes,
that's part of that anticipatory reflex. It's a self-preservation thing that maybe we really need to investigate
yeah.
and
And
ask,
maybe
is that needed here?
and maybe my anticipation put my weight and
There you
my
go.
body already on too far to the left, and
Good
his only
point.
option was to turn right.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, but
Don't want to find out.
yeah, but I'll never forget that because I'm like, when did you like, when did you
Can do
learn to
it
turn right,
in
right?
necessities when it's necessary.
When it's necessary.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that anticipatory, and that's the other thing I do want to mention is once we have had an accident with a horse, our horse,
Mm.
right, or a horse we ride regularly, that anticipatory response comes up big time.
Totally agree. The post-traumatic stress of it all. Yeah. And I
Yes.
usually tell people just sit with it and ask, is that happening right now? Is that the truth?
Yeah. That's
Is it
very
the truth?
similar to what I
Yeah.
do is I go, we're going to go towards riding that horse again. But anytime you start to feel that
Mhm.
anticipatory reflex, and let's say it escalates your fear, then we're going to pause right there in that
Right.
spot at that moment, doing that very thing until you can feel safe again.
Right.
So we're not going to run away from it, but we're not going to try to push through it, show no fear, suck it up, buttercup. We're just going to right? We're going to work with wherever that comes up. Or the same thing with horses that are terrified of trailer loading. I go, some horses see the trailer, and that
Mhm.
begins the escalation of the stress
Right.
response, right? Or they hear the trailer being hooked up and they're already anticipating in the stall.
I had a horse dropped off, a horse with EPM that I'm treating. And the owner came, he'd been here 2 weeks, and the owner showed up in the truck that she uses to haul the trailer with.
And the
A-
horse knew.
And he lost it. He completely lost it. But the trailer was not there, you know? So it's amazing
Yeah.
how even the horses set themselves up.
No, and that's how we heal from traumatic events or how we work through fear issues is not to use more leverage or push or
Good
shove
point.
or try not to be afraid. I go, that's impossible for people and horses. But when we
Good
start to
point.
learn to recognize this anticipatory reflex, that also tells us right there with whatever we're doing in any context, we need to pause.
We
We
need
don't
to,
have to
yeah,
go
just
away,
shut down.
but we need to
Yep.
quit moving towards.
Yes.
Like, we just need to stop right there. We're not going to retreat and we're not going to advance. We're just going to stop until everything chills down a
Yeah.
little bit, until energy levels come back down, until we go, okay, I feel safe here now, right? And that
Exactly.
helps us, it helps pull the human brain out of the past bad experiences or the imagined horrible outcomes.
Right.
Like I go, okay, right here, right now, in this space, at this distance, doing this specific thing, I do feel safe.
And that's why I'm around horses, is because they force me to be in the moment.
Yeah,
Because they're not thinking about that before, after, right at that moment. It's us with the anticipatory reflex that could get us in trouble in our relationship with our horse.
yeah. And horses do have good memories, so they can bring the past
Right.
into the equation, but they don't really have the capacity of imagination. So it's sort of past, present, and for us, it's past, present, future,
Right.
right? And the way we help horses, like a horse that's afraid of trailer loading, is wherever that anxiety or tension is starting to increase, we can just pause on the spot. And for some horses, that's about 200 yards from the trailer.
It can be. You never know.
You never know.
It's everybody's bubble is a certain size, and we don't know what that for that horse might be,
Right.
or person for that matter. Because we've all experienced walking into a room and felt like there's one person that's taking up the entire space. It's like, oh, okay, that energy, that's huge.
Mm.
So gauging
Mm.
the energy in the space is really important.
No, and I think when we associate fear with something,
Mm.
that actually heightens our sensitivity. I think it makes that big blah, blah, blah. It makes that bubble bigger.
And it intensifies it for sure, because we can really be a hamster on a wheel in our thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we just are, even if we're on the lookout for
Right.
this thing we're talking about today, right? This anticipatory reflex, or on the lookout for where's that moment for our horse before we
That's a good
don't,
point.
if we don't notice it and the horse keeps escalating, then we have a dangerous situation or we have a big argument or things get bad. But if we start to notice the moment our horse is having that anticipatory reflex, we could sort of pause on the spot and go, look, we're fine. Everything's fine. We don't need to move away, but we don't need to move towards. We can take our time. And
I
that
had that with a
is,
horse I was working yesterday. What did we do? What changed at the farm? Oh, we got a load of sawdust. And
I know, right?
sawdust bin had been emptied for 2 weeks. And I was long lining him, and he came around the corner and saw that, and it's like, well, wait a minute.
That wasn't there yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I redirected him. I didn't push him towards it
Mm-hmm.
because he was anticipating me pushing him and forcing him to look at it. And 3 or 4 times, every time he'd look at it, we just changed direction. And then by about the fifth time, he said, I think I want to go look at that.
Yeah. No, one of the most powerful things that I found in rehabbing horses with really what we call severe behavioral issues is I keep bringing the work back and back and back and back, making the
Right.
task easier and easier and easier for a horse to achieve successfully. And then I'll pick a super easy task, and the horse, as they let down that defensive energy and relax into it, I go, okay, we're done. And what I found is it takes away the negative sort of
Yeah.
anticipation.
The anticipation of the negative. That's a good way to put it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I will unwind really chronic behavioral issues, or sometimes with trailer loading. I'll go to the trailer, but I sit in the back of the trailer. I get the horse to face the open trailer, but not get in. And after 2 or 3 sessions of that, the horse is like, well, that wasn't so bad. That trailer wasn't so bad. That trailer being there wasn't so bad. And I start removing all of that fear that's been associated with the trailer. So I
Right.
go, we might go to the trailer and you don't have to get in, but we're going to go look at the trailer. And we're going to look at the trailer until you realize it's not as bad as you think it is.
Right.
Right? Then we might poke the whiskers in the trailer, or we might poke the nose in the trailer and sort of explore. Yep, doesn't hurt, not too bad, right? But sort of removing that negative anticipation
Mm.
is really how you help your horse overcome things that you just think they can't do. I
And
go,
I
they can
love
learn to
that.
do
I
it.
love remove the negative anticipation because it's everywhere in our lives.
Oh, yeah.
It's it's me, like I'm going to go teach at a Montessori school this afternoon. Boy, I can play some really good head games about that.
Right. How it's going to go. Right.
So I just have to pause and go, it hasn't happened yet. I'm prepared. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah. And when I used to do demos with my horse Prima, I realized at a certain point after X number of demos that I was really having that anticipatory reflex, even thinking about it. And as
Yep.
soon as I would get my mare out of her stall, she's like, who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And the result of that was no matter how much we practiced at home, once we got in front of an audience, Prima may or may not do any of the tricks we had worked on. She may pick
Right.
her own, she may listen to me, she may run away from me. I never knew what was going to happen. And that just kept feeding the kind of negative nervousness. And finally,
That's really a good point because if you think about people going to horse shows,
same thing. It's like
yeah.
your horse is looking at you going, who are
Who
you?
who
What
showed up at the
happened to
barn
you?
this morning?
Right. What's up with that
Yeah,
energy? Right.
what's that stuff coming down? And you don't see that in upper level riders. They're just going to ride whatever is brought to them that moment.
Right. And what I had to learn to do was have the exact same dynamic that I had at home on my most relaxed day with my horse.
Mm,
That's what I had to create in our own little invisible world, our
mm,
little bubble, every time I got, in front of a judge, an audience,
right.
anything like that. I just learned to shut them out and just pretend I was at home.
Yeah, good. That
And
worked.
it worked because Prima was like, well, finally you're back. And so of course she would do everything we had practiced successfully because she's like, well, now you're the same person,
Right.
right? Now I know who you are.
Yeah, because if you think about it, because they're flight animals, that they probably are like, What? What? You want me to do what?"
Well, just like you described with the shavings, part of
Yeah,
horse's instinct is to notice
anything.
anything that changes in any environment. So when we go take our horse to a strange environment, we need to be the same. That's where the security is
Right.
because everything else is different. And I've had horses notice if I left the wheelbarrow outside,
I
right? And
know.
I'm like, that wheelbarrow is not where it
That
usually
doesn't go
is.
there.
It doesn't go there. And they all sort of jump at it because it's in the wrong place. But yeah,
Yeah.
that is the thing that our horses rely on when they're in unfamiliar environments
Mhm.
is, are we the same person that they know on an easy day at home? Are we that same person?
Right.
And I had
That's
to
a
look at
great
myself and
question.
go, I was not the same person.
We
I,
try to be, but
I, wa- I was very different. Yeah.
that's funny.
All right, so we better wrap it up. We hope you guys enjoyed our little geeky. Oh, will you read
Geeky.
that one more
Oh,
time? The definition of the anticipatory reflex.
glasses again.
I love that.
Anticipatory reflexes are postural muscle contractions that happen before a voluntary movement to prepare for the movement's destabilizing effects.
And wasn't there a little more? Was there a
Yep,
second
there's a
part to that?
yep, they are activated in a feed forward manner, meaning they happen before any sensory feedback about potential instability.
Mm.
So it's kind of
So,
outside of the loop.
well, and it's like before what we see takes meaning in our head. Whatever our senses
Mhm.
can perceive, we haven't given it meaning yet. We don't
Right.
understand it yet, but we're already having this anticipatory reflex.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that is wicked fast. Like
that's
that's, yeah,
wicked fast.
wicked fast. Happens. And so just becoming, like you said, just becoming aware
But that's
that we
happening.
all have
Mhm.
an anticipatory reflex, as soon as we're aware of it, we've changed it.
We can change. Yep.
We can change it, but I think like what you said is just the awareness of it kind of changes it.
Yep. It can.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So thanks for joining us. Thank you guys for liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, passing it around. If you like what we talk about here on the Horse Geeks podcast, please share or I don't know if you do something like comment,
Send
thumbs
us
up,
some
whatever.
questions. We love to answer people's questions.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye,
Bye, everybody.
everybody.